Hey, everybody.
Hi.
Mike, Seth, Tim Stafford, the Trinity of something, the Voxology podcast. I don't know. We're so glad that you're here. Thank you for tuning in. I got to say, the Mike and Seth part of this Trinitarian unity has been off of school all week. We are digging out. We got, 6-7 inches of snow on Monday, and then ice and like below zero temperatures, and you just don't get that a lot in Tennessee. And so it's been a mess, ladies and gentlemen, a mess. Yeah. Seth, but have you been okay staying home all week?
Yeah.
Have you missed school? Have you missed school?
Yeah.
I don't believe that. So I don't believe that at all. So anyway, we hope wherever you are is better weather than here. Today, so several years ago, we interviewed a gentleman named Michael Ware, who wrote a book called Reclaiming Hope. He had served in the sort of faith liaison office of President Obama, and kind of offers a really unique perspective on like the role of faith in politics from much more of an insider's view than what I've ever heard. And so he just has come out with a new book that's about spiritual formation in politics, the spirit of our politics. So we thought we'd have him back on because I don't know if anyone knows this. It's an election year this year, Tim. I don't know if you knew that, but there are debates happening and caucuses or caucus. I don't know what's the plural caucuses is, are happening. And so it's already, my social media feed, it's already sort of ramping up. And, I think that we're big fans of living in the current system of democracy and Western style democracy. And, man, if this seems like the least bad thing. And so we're huge fans of voting. I think where we want to spend a lot of time and where we've spent time before is when our voting preferences get wed to spiritual language, and there seems to be a lot of that going around, and so that's a deep corruption of the spiritual language for sure. When it gets employed to the point where evangelical Christianity is just synonymous with a certain political persuasion. That is idolatry and blasphemy, and all the things, all the big words. And so we're searching out people like Caitlin Chess and Michael. I want to go out talk to a guy named Lee Camp, who wrote a book years ago called Scandalous Witness, about how do we best be political, because the kingdom is a political entity. We are political people. Politics is not necessarily a bad thing, right? It's necessary for our corporate life together. But how is it that we can form political opinions, exercise our privilege to vote, and interact with people who are coming from all over and the different backgrounds when we see issues of such significance? They feel like matters of life and death, and harm or protection or whatever. So anyway, this is our first step at just starting that conversation. As we go through the year, we'll revisit this topic periodically for obvious reasons. And Michael's just a good guy. I mean, if you follow him on social media, he's just a guy who really wants to see Christians do well. And one of the central arguments of his book is that Christians have good to offer the political process, which not many of us would agree with. So anyway, hope you enjoy this one. We are kind of all over the map, but it's particularly if there are people listening who are big fans of John Mark Comer and Practicing the Way and Dallas Willard's work, Michael's book is about how you apply that in the political arena.
Yeah.
So it's about spiritual formation in politics, and becoming the kind of people who represent God well politically without predetermining what that looks like. So anyway, hope you enjoy it. And there's Seth Theory doing the Shema. Echad, yep. Hero Israel, Lord, the Lord alone. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love your neighbor. Amen. Oh, we're doing bless you and keep you?
Yeah.
Okay. Seth Theory, I don't know. I think we've probably mentioned this a time or two. Seth Theory is a black belt in closing services. So whenever he hears us kind of wrapping up, like he's got thoughts about how this should go. Thank you, Mr. Seth. So may the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord shine his face upon you and be gracious to you. May the Lord lift up his countenance to you. And in these days, may he give us
peace.
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 Thank you for tuning in, ladies and gentlemen.
And amen, Tim Stafford.
And amen, Tim Stafford.
That's right.
Hey, everybody. Do you know what the world needs? The world needs the opinions of more middle-aged white guys. Welcome to the Voxology podcast. We're here to offer the world more opinions from middle-aged white guys because obviously they're not enough. Today, we have kind of an esteemed guest. Like, we interviewed this gentleman right after his first book called Reclaiming Hope, and now he's a big freaking deal. And so he was a big deal back then, but I think he's a bigger deal now. Don't you like head a center of something, or aren't you like a liaison to some fancy thing, Michael? Like you're a big deal. Tell me about your big dealness, Michael. Sure. Let's hear it.
So we in 2022 we founded a new nonprofit called the Center for Christianity and Public Life, and
I love that.
So folks can learn more about that at ccpubliclife.org. Yeah.
Come on. And the goal of that is what?
Our mission is to contend for the credibility of Christian resources in public life for the public good. And we're based in the nation's capital, but it's been a really wonderful experience so far.
I love that. And tell me a little bit about yourself. Were you born and raised in did you have a religious heritage when you were growing up? If so, what was that? And if not, when did that sort of come into your view?
Yeah, so grew up in Buffalo, New York, in a Italian Catholic family. Wouldn't have considered myself in childhood a devout Christian. I was there's a longer story, but I was handed a tract of Romans when I was 15, and it changed my life. And I gave my life to Jesus.
That's amazing.
That set the trajectory for everything that would follow. Yeah.
Yeah. Which, I mean, as much as I look at sort of disdain on like evangelistic tracks, every now and again I meet somebody who's like, yep, that's what did it. And I just think that's absolutely amazing. So Michael Ware is our guest today, and he wrote a book called The Spirit of Our Politics, which I actually have read, so I should know exactly what the title is. When did you become, so Jesus follower at like 15-ish, but when did you become interested in politics?
Before I was a Christian, I was interested in civic life. My grandfather was really important to me. He served in World War II, came back, was not a very political person, but invested in the community. And so I was interested in politics. After I became a Christian, I thought, well, now I need to go to seminary, become a pastor. But thankfully, there was a pastor in my life who said, Michael, there are Christians who aren't pastors. And I thought, oh, that's a really good observation. And so, this question of what does it mean to be faithful in and with public things has been one at the center of my professional life, and in many ways my personal life since that point.
Yeah. And that led you were involved in the Obama administration, correct?
I was, yeah. So I worked in the White House for 3.5 years, and Was an honor to serve there. And so, yeah, I have experience in government. And then following the White House, I worked as an advisor to a range of Christian organizations, leaders, and philanthropic institutions, helping them to navigate public life.
I love that. So when you look at how, let's say Christianity and politics have changed since you were involved in the White House, what are things that you're seeing that are concerning that you think are relatively new, or if they've been here before, have been intensified in the last, say, 8 years?
Yeah, sure. I think what we've really seen develop in this century is what I refer to in the book, and it's I'm sharing a framework that was developed by a range of social scientists to describe the particular kind of polarization we have in our politics today, and that's political sectarianism. And the social scientists say political sectarianism is a toxic cocktail composed of 3 ingredients. That is the tendency to other your political opponents, the tendency of aversion, so an aversion, and then a misplaced moralism. So sort of raising the stakes of political disagreement to that of good and evil, or even sort of iniquity. So to say political disagreement is a sin, so to speak. And so that has really accelerated, and we've seen the dangerous places that leads in our politics. So I think that's certainly heightened. I think alongside that, and in the same, they're all contributing. These factors are all contributing to one another. We obviously see a rise of political independence. We see increasing diversity in a number of ways, racial, religious, and so yeah. I mean, I think our politics. There are some through lines, but we've also been able to see some trends develop, particularly over the last 20 years.
Have you seen this as you've worked with faith-based nonprofits and churches? How have you seen this impact the church?
Oh, profoundly.
Yeah.
Profoundly. And so I think, and right, the church is big and diverse, and there are different traditions and histories with engaging in politics. But I do think that there was a well-meaning sort of set stream of the church that just kind of thought, the best. We've seen how faith and politics, how this can go awry, and so sort of the best approach is to just try and keep politics out. Politics has nothing to do with the life of the church. Well, the problem with that is that the people in your church have political responsibilities, and they're soaking in a politically toxic in a toxic political culture, and so I think that has changed because pastors have come to see how politics is disrupting and in some ways destructive to the life of the church, without the church having resources, not just to ward off the worst, but to actually, part of what I lay out in the book is this hope that the church could be a gift to our politics, that Christians could be a gift to our politics, as opposed to thinking the best case scenario is that we just make it through another election. Totally. That isn't the most aspirational or even productive sort of mindset to have.
And some of that comes from political life is either dismissed as irrelevant to Christianity, or you suggest it's co-opted as a tool for advancing policy. Yeah. And so if we were to counter both of those tendencies and to say, no, Christians have something good to offer political life, where would you begin to unpack what that good could be?
Yeah. So this book and so much of my work these days is grounded in the idea that the kind of people we are has much to do with the kind of politics and public life that we have. And so
it's not just a separate thing.
It's
cut
not
off
just
from
a
me.
separate thing. That's exactly right. And by treating it as a separate thing, not only are we robbing our public life of resources it desperately needs, but we're also making whole life discipleship an impossibility. We're actually communicating and to the extent that we actually believe this, saying that there's an area of life, area of activity in which Jesus is not up to the task. And we see this playing out in our politics in a whole range of ways in which people say, yeah, I know Jesus says love your enemies, but if you try that in politics, you'll get steamrolled. That just doesn't work.
Exactly. It doesn't work.
It doesn't work. Yeah. And that's the death knell to discipleship.
Yes.
And look, that same logic, it doesn't say, so people will say, well, yeah, I guess, but we're in such rough shape now that the church, like there are so many issues that the church, we need to improve ourselves. We can't think about politics. The church needs to get its own house in order, and then we'll be fit to take on these public questions. And discipleship doesn't work that way. We like to tell ourselves that we could quarantine these areas of life off from the rest of our souls. But what actually happens is the same logic that we use to say, well, loving your enemy, it just doesn't seem reasonable in politics. That's the same kind of logic that a business owner has when they sit down with their accounting book at the end of the year and go, I don't know if this adds up, but I'm employing people. I need this so if I move these numbers around, we can make it work. I don't feel good about it, but I know other people in my field are doing the same thing. So it's everyone's doing it. All I need to do is fudge these numbers a little bit, and then maybe I'll tithe a little extra to church. I'll do the right thing in other areas and just sort of like overweight my faithfulness. So this is just, so this is what I think we're coming to contend with is actually we are seeking as followers of Jesus to follow him with our whole lives. And we, as citizens in America, for those who are citizens in America, we have a limited but essential political responsibility that we do not choose to have, but that we already have. And so we're trying to steward the responsibility we have in a way that's faithful, in the same way that we do as sons and as employees and employers and all of these things. And that's the conversation I want to have.
Yeah. So one piece of this is there is something to be said about reintegrating political life into discipleship life, church life, and then just not peeling it off as a separate part of me. Like when I'm in the voting booth, I'm someone else. You know what I mean? Like, yes. So my faith is welcome in the public square, blah, 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 blah. But we've seen that hurt so many people. How is it that Christianity offers goodness to our politics?
Yeah. So what I want to you could, we're trying to preempt and sort of we're trying to preempt a debate before it even begins. We're trying to preempt or somehow avoid the fact of who people are. So we say, well, look, there are some Christians making some bad contributions. There's some people who identify as Christian who are making some bad contributions to politics. What we need is to make sure is to say, don't you need to segment off whatever you think, whatever the Christian influence part is, or whatever you think the Christian influence is from politics, and then we'll be rid of that influence. The problem is that people are people, and so I don't know what practical. I don't know what the lever is. I don't know what you actually do to say that somehow people are going to leave what they take to be the dictates of their faith at the door of their politics. So it's all kind of a shell game to begin with. And second of all, even if that was possible, you still have the person to deal with. And we need to face the fact that the state of our politics is a reflection of the state of our souls. There's no sort of procedure to get around that fact at the end of the day. That is the glory of democracy, and it's the weakness of democracy. That there's no getting around the people who make it up. And so, like, I think when we need to stop sort of conceding is this idea that the people who are the most belligerent, the most destructive, that the problem is that they're holding on to their Christianity too tightly. That lighten up a bit. Instead, what I want to say is it's actually ludicrous to look at folks who will welcome a politician into their church. That politician says, look, I know you all believe in that love your enemy stuff, but that's not practical. They clap. And the commentary on this from both media and from a lot of Christians is that's Christian nationalism. These folks don't know where to. These folks are combining faith and politics too tightly. They need to separate it. And what I want to say is no. What they're separating their faith and politics. Why are we conceding that the ones who are saying loving your enemies, Jesus' very words, is impractical in politics? They're the Christian ones. They're the most Christian. The people who think that politics is a place to harm others rather than seek their good, they're the Christian ones. And this whole discourse is developed to it concedes just outright falsehoods about the faith. It also doesn't give Christians any place to stand on. So if the structure of the argument is that their problem is that they're too confident in their Christian faith, then what are we supposed to have confidence in? Instead, what I think is both the practical argument and the reality is that actually the problem is that for all of the bloviation, for all of the stridency, it actually is a veneer for profound insecurity.
So the issue isn't. So when we want to look at people who are belligerent and invoking the name of Jesus for things we horrified by, you're saying the issue isn't. We shouldn't say, oh, well, they're holding on to their Christian faith too tightly, and that's the reason why they're like this. But you would rather say that's an expression of fundamental insecurity,
among other things. Yes,
among other things. Okay, what is it that leads people, do you think, to a view that says that Jesus's words here are impractical in politics, and so the ends justify the means entirely?
Yeah. So one of the things is the second chapter of my book, I discuss Willard's idea, and I should say, so this book is, and we could talk more about this. This book is an application of Dallas Willard's ideas. Dallas Willard was a philosopher, teacher, writer. An application of Dallas Willard's ideas to public life and politics. And Willard had this idea of the disappearance of moral knowledge, by which he simply meant well, not simply, but the one liner or sort of top line here is that in the post World War II era, gatekeepers of knowledge proceeded as if and decided and acted as if religious and moral knowledge is not to be counted among what is considered to be publicly available knowledge. So religious and moral knowledge is at best maybe of personal benefit, though it has no grounding in any truth or reality. But it certainly can't be. It's not publicly available. It's not something that can be tested. And this has led to a place where you have. We live in a moral universe. Our politics, our own lives run on moral decision making. And yet there's no basis, there's no authority from which we can appeal publicly to that moral decision making. And so that is one way, and I unpack this all in the book, but that is one way. And Willard is very clear. This is not just a secular imposition. The church has contributed to and acquiesced to the development of the disappearance of moral knowledge within its own tradition and institutions in critical ways. And so when you understand that, then it becomes quite understandable why you would find a church embracing the idea, or why you would find some folks embracing the idea that it's a teaching of the religion, but Jesus really wasn't thinking about like actual practical decisions that we have to make.
Right.
Jesus is not valued for his executive decision making capacities, and so that's one explanation. And I think there are others as well. I mean, I think our political culture is saturating. I think that you have a problem of discipleship in the sense that you have people that are experts. I talk about this concept, political hobbyism, in the book, and this idea that folks are consuming a lot of politics as entertainment, and that's filling up a lot of their imagination. Whereas at best, we have declining church attendance. We have at best, pastors are getting their folks for 45 minutes on a Sunday, so it's hard to match that up. But we could talk about those more. But those are some of the factors that play into it.
Yeah, for sure. What does a truly Christian approach to politics look like, do you think?
Yeah, so I think in terms of let me answer it this way. I think for so long, when we have talked about a truly Christian approach to politics, or what is a biblical worldview approach, applied to politics, what people are asking for and what they're expecting is, tell me how to vote. What's the position I need to hold on the issues?
That's right. What's a Christian position here?
Yeah. And all those are prudential decisions that Christianity offers resources, and folks should be drawing on those, and bring your faith to your consideration of how you vote and what position you hold on issues. The problem is when we baptize and elevate to the level of dogma our political opinions. What the mistake that gets made, C.S. Lewis writes about this in an essay, Meditations on the Third Commandment. He says the real temptation when you combine faith and politics is the temptation to proclaim God hath said where he has not spoken. To sort of take the authority of ultimate truth and apply it to these penultimate decisions. And that's what we want to avoid. So much of the gifts that I think Christianity has to offer our politics in this moment is not necessarily telling politics what it should be, but telling politics what it is not. In a political culture that is so consuming, that does position itself as this binary choice between good and evil. Christianity tells our politics that it's penultimate, that actually the most important decisions in life are not made in the political realm. They're important. Politics is essential, but it's not ultimate. We can remind politics of its own fallibility. That even if you bring the right intentions, and I think we can be really poor judges regarding our own political intentions, even if you bring the right intentions to politics, policy instruments, and the way that politics functions, the history of public policy in this country, and I think the history of public policy generally, is a history of unintended consequences. And folks who thought that something that they did was going to achieve this outcome, but actually it achieved sometimes a contrary outcome, or it had all of these unintended consequences that then you had to spend the next decade, the next century, whatever, contending with the negative consequences of the thing that you fought so hard to achieve. And so this kind of, again, politics is important. We need to be involved both as citizens and as Christians who love their neighbors. But a part of a Christian approach to politics is rightly situating it, and rightly situating the moral burden that accompanies our political discourse.
There's a lot of pressure in Christian circles, like voting is your God-given duty.
Yeah, right.
So how do you see that squaring with what you just said? Like people will tie voting into the ultimate, and so there's this like, there is a very genuine social pressure in Christian circles to vote.
Yeah.
How do you respond to that?
Yeah. So Willard, I have a chapter in my book on this, and Willard, he defined kingdom as the range of your effective will. So God's kingdom is the range of His effective will, where what He wants done is done. Willard says, as individuals, each person has their own individual little kingdom where what they want done is done. It's the range of their effective will.
Until they get married, yes.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Well, so right, that's the human story, right? So what happens when your kingdom brushes up against, when your will brushes up against the will of others, and that's where what happens when human will runs counter to God's will, right? This is the human story. And so you threw me off with the marital comment because I'm deciding exactly how much I want to dive in there. But so the voting is within the range of your effective will. If you have the right to vote in America, it is within, and the vote itself, in terms of once you get into the voting booth, you have a choice where what you want to be done is done in terms of who you're voting for. The problem is that we talk about voting not just as Christians, but actually, there are all these public service announcements and civic campaigns that talk about voting as make your voice heard. And treat what I write about in the book is voting as an expression, an unmediated expression of your will. Well, that's not what a vote is. And when people are voting, they know that's not what it is. They go, if I was actually voting is probably the least imprecise expression of your will that exists in politics.
I love that.
And so what happens when you load on moral weight on a binary decision that is the result of, like, the voter has no impact on who runs, the voter has limited impact, like extremely minute, limited impact on the options that are even presented to them.
Totally.
And then the voter has voting is a blunt instrument. We pretend like we could express all of these things with our vote. So, and politicians love that because they want to claim a mandate from, I won the election, so that means that on the 18th page of my policy platform, I propose this, so I have a mandate to get it done. But no one who voted for that candidate read, very few people know. And so we actually want to make sure that, yes, we want to faithfully steward our vote. I think you could make an argument that we want people to steward the influence that they have in a way that is most loving towards their neighbors. And I think that there are is staying home and not voting the most loving action that you could take? Is that willing the good of your neighbors with the influence that you have? I don't think we need to elevate it to the level of unfaithful, whatever, sin, whatever. I think it's just a question for Christians to consider. I have this responsibility that's within the range of my effective will. What's the best way to steward it? But what we need to do is make sure the moral burden we're placing on voting is rightly sized and not pressuring and burdening people as if their vote means more than it does.
Yeah. No, that's really helpful. Tim, I think you had something you wanted to chip in with?
Yeah, this is such an important conversation, obviously, for a myriad of reasons. And it seems it's become so much more publicly pertinent just with the Christian nationalism conversations that are everywhere. Obviously, a lot of more candidates are using God rhetoric within things as they either push into that or push away from that. And so the stuff in your book, I think, is really helpful. One of the things I think that gives you a really interesting insight, and I don't know if this is helpful to this or not, but we'll ask it and we can see, is the fact that you've worked in the White House. And so I'm curious. I think a lot of people, we all have our understanding of this side of the fence, whether it's through different colored lenses or not, But from the other side of the fence, what did you see as how faith actually plays out in the White House when the cameras are off? Because I think that we all have varied expectations or desires for what that looks like. And we hear the rhetoric, but it's hard to, none of us, 99.9% of our audience has not been in the White House, let alone been part of those conversations. So what did that look like on the other side of the fence with how that operates or how that's used or how it's spoken about within the White House in your experience?
Yeah. So, right. So, one, everyone in politics isn't the same. Every politician isn't the same. Every White House isn't the same. Faith comes up in an array of contexts. So, hurricane strikes in a region of the country, faith is going to come up in a different way than if there's a conversation about political constituencies and press releases on something the White House did recently. So I just want to, I know you're asking about a much more specific thing, but
yeah, no, that's fair.
But just to, what I'd say, let me say two things. One, the disappearance of moral knowledge is present there too. So, I think often when I was talking with conservative Christians about the Obama White House, I'd say, look, no one is waking up in the morning thinking about, how do I upset, the religious right today, like that. I think what Christians need to contend with is that we need to stop assuming that the public and civic decision makers understand what it means to be Christian, or even what a religious conscience looks like, or is, or this is just a fact of demographic and cultural change, and it's our responsibility, largely, not entirely, but largely, to address that. But I think Christians are so used to the idea that Americans just learn what it means to be Christian, or at least sort of like basics about Christianity through cultural osmosis. Right. We are increasingly not living in that country anymore. And so that's just, so I mean, the upshot there is like, government's not thinking about faith as much as some people fear, or as much as some people hope. Right. Like, so that would be the first.
That's such a good line. That is such a good line.
Like it's there is in some cases. Well, let me. So this isn't government, but I was talking with a leader of a philanthropic institution, and this is philanthropy, private philanthropy, so not government. But this is kind of indicative of the whole thing, and this philanthropic institution funds is concerned with poverty, and so they're funding efforts in poor communities to provide people with jobs, whatever. And I'm talking with this philanthropic leader about all that the faith-based community contributes to the social safety net, and to the things that this foundation cares about. And I finished talking, and the philanthropic leader goes to me, well, Michael, this sounds like great work, but we can't give to religion because of the separation of church and state. And I just responded, which one are you? But there is just this idea, like we're doing practical work, and church is what, you want us to like pray about poverty? Like there's just no. Yeah. There was a Bridgespan report that came out a few years ago that showed, faith-based nonprofits receive 8% of funding from philanthropic institutions for social safety net work. Well, faith-based nonprofits provide 40% of the social safety net. So that might seem like a non sequitur, but it just goes like they aren't thinking as much as some of us might want, or they're thinking as much as some people fear. The second thing I'd say is, I'll give it away. I think the criticism I expected as I was writing this book was that it's not the accusation, which I don't necessarily agree with, that it's not systemic enough. Mm-hmm. So the criticism that, okay, you're right that the kind of people we are has much to do with the kind of politics we have, but we have a campaign finance system that elevates the voice of some and quiets the voice of others, and all these sort of structural things. And I think that's true. And I think the politicians make their own decisions, and we have structures that do shape sort of how the democratic process works. But here's the thing, after working in the White House, that I came to be really convicted about. We shouldn't let politicians or our political systems off the hook. They need to be held accountable. So much of their behavior, though, is in response to the incentives that we provide them.
Yeah.
So much of it is a reaction to the kind of behavior that we actually demand explicitly or implicitly of them. And that while I believe in public policy, I've spent my life in public policy and political change, for all of the change that is needed, policies that I think would give us a healthier politics. those structural changes are only going to emerge out of the kind of people who could sustain and have the imagination for those kinds of changes.
Yeah.
And we are constantly trying to sort of technique our way out of social problems. T.S. Eliot has this line. He said, man's endeavor has been to try to create a system so perfect that people no longer have to be good. And I think that is such an apt insight into our politics today. Our politics suggests it doesn't matter what kind of people we are in our politics. We just need to do whatever necessary to get the policies that we want in place. Well, the problem, as Willard would say, the problem is our wanter. We think all the impediments to what we want are the problem. Right. The problem is too often that which we want. If you want to fix the problem, you need to fix the wanter, and then a lot else will at least be able to be productively addressed, if not resolve itself.
Right.
Yeah, I love that, man. Michael, we're such big fans of your work, man. Thank you for all that you do. If people want to track you online, where can they find you?
Yeah, learn about the Center for Christianity and Public Life at ccpubliclife.org. You can follow me on social media. I'm on X, Twitter, whatever you call it, Michael R. Ware, Instagram at Michael Ware. And The Spirit of Our Politics, Spiritual Formation, and the Renovation of Public Life is available wherever you buy your books.
Love it, man. Thank you so much for your time.
Great to be with you, as always. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep, bye.
So there you have it, ladies and gentlemen, or as Tim said, there you have it, sports fans.
That's right.
We think, we're just hinting at stuff in an interview like that, but there's some things that were in the book that struck me enough that I want to kind of go revisit them throughout this year. He talks about, let's see, the partisan forces influence our religious identities and are responsible for shaping religious divides along partisan lines.
Yeah, which is insane.
And that part, I want to spend a boatload of time on, because here's how I experienced this part in the church. All right. So I joined Journey in 2021. And we were still trying to figure out masks and those sorts of things. We had
a fun time start.
Oh, so great. And so there were times we weren't meeting and it was only online. There were other times we were meeting. And we had one service where masks were required, another service where masks were optional. And the amount of upset there was that we would offer the other option.
Right. Either or.
Was absolutely ridiculous. Yeah. And then George Floyd happened during all of that time. And there was, and maybe this has always been true, but it's not felt as true as it has the last 4 years, that our political identities are more important than our religious identities. So what will happen is we will have people come into the church and we will talk about something biblically, say justice, a very biblical concept, beyond a biblical concept, right? This was God's idea. And that justice is worship. I mean, that's so throughout. But the minute you use that word, right. I remember getting emails from people, this church does not align with my values. Now, there's no argument there about this church, doesn't agree with the Bible, but it's, I come into a religious environment with preset political thoughts and feelings that, and if those are in any way, shape, or form called into question, then I'm out.
Right.
That to me began to open me up to the idea that yes, and we even talked about this when Trent ran the first time. I would say things like, listen, our identification with our brothers and sisters in Christ from a different political party, we have more in common with them than we do with people who are not followers of Jesus, who hold our political beliefs, who share them. And we would get so much pushback on that. that idea that no, politics is ultimate. Now, they wouldn't say that. They would say, no, of course, I choose the politics that best reflect the Christian faith. But when you push it that, you find that the politics is more important than the Christian faith.
Yeah.
Right? Because how else could you justify things that deliberately go against the words of Jesus? But I mean, it's like Ben Carson, this very famous Christian physician or doctor or something, I saw a clip of him saying, listen, who cares if Donald Trump's mouth is bad? Vote for his policies.
Right.
It doesn't matter the character of the person. All that matters is the policies they can do for you. And Michael Ware goes into the idea that policies are no longer for the common good. Policies are for the base, to satisfy the base. And so compromise is out, because compromise, I mean, you see that with the Speaker of the House, who said he was the new Moses or something. He made a deal with Schumer about spending bill, and now there's a part of his caucus that is revolting because he compromised.
Right.
And again, I'm not just picking on the Republican version of this, although that's the one I'm most familiar with because that's the one my tribe has embraced. I think this happens all over everywhere. But the thing that I'm very disturbed by, that Michael begins to unravel or give me language for, is how it is that political identity has trumped, literally, religious identity in a lot of different ways. And so that when you're in a religious environment that doesn't grant the validity of your political beliefs, that's seen as a personal attack. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Man, we are swimming in idolatrous waters when we cannot have conversations that, that are about, listen, if the Bible isn't allowed to inquire about our pre-selected opinions on things, then we've stopped being disciples, and now we're just echo chambers, right? So part of discipleship is allowing the moral vision of the Scripture to rummage through the way I see the world and to call out the inconsistencies and the contradictions.
But instead, it's vice versa.
Yeah, exactly. And maybe that's always been the case and I just wasn't aware of it, but there's so much political energy around that now with the accompanying moralism that if like, how many pastors are we going to hear? And again, I use the term pastor so loosely here, but like, if you don't vote for this candidate, you're opposing God.
How many presidents of churches?
Oh,
no, I think it's interesting. It may not be always have been
crazy.
Politics, but there has always been some version of civic life or something that has, I think, captured the imagination of the church. And I think that's largely why we have 3,000 denominations. And like while you were talking, I was just like, yeah, we have terms for that. It's called conservative Christianity and progressive Christianity. And you move into one of those departments and they're like separate religions because of the fact that they're dictated by a different source. And we've gotten comfortable, I think, with just letting those demographics define themselves. Totally. And then you look for it is hard. I'm going to choose my words. No,
I know. It's hard.
Well,
because go ahead.
The flag culture, and the wearing of hats and shirts, and it has really, really become an identity. And maybe these are the death throes of this system.
Maybe,
but people are largely choosing to be identified in that way rather than the other way around. And so that's part of the reason why I asked him that question about what does it look like behind the doors in the White House, because I think we have a perverted imagination with what that actually looks like. With the leaders, or because the rhetoric is so strong of doing God's will. Like, man, we're fighting our school board right now. I was just at a meeting last night, and they're making decisions that are counter to the community, but but often the language is baptized in religious rhetoric, and
and that's the part I need to draw. I want to do a whole episode on this at some point. But it's like going back to the the conversation we had last episode about, it's less about the specific doctrine you hold and more about how it is that you arrived at that place, right? And how it is that you hold it and the kind of community. And so we have to say this because people keep pressing. This isn't about whether you vote for Trump or DeSantis or Biden or Kamala or whatever. That's you. That's you. That's the range of your effective will. It's when your vote gets baptized, when God language gets co-opted into that process, that's where, for what it's worth, Mike and Tim have a real problem. And that's the idolatry. So if you want to vote for whoever, vote for whoever. I mean, that's the great experiment we're a part of. But it's when that gets energized with religious language, that's the idolatry. That's the blasphemy. That's the stuff that, and my tribe, the tribe I'm historically been a part of, it all leans one way.
Yeah.
So if you hear us critiquing only one way, it's because that tribe has used that language in service of one party and not the other. So it does. It is exhausting. And the number of pastors who are fed up with the fact that they can't disciple anymore because there are, like I was reading this week about somebody who was saying, listen, it used to be when somebody would say, hey, pastor, we need to talk. It would be some sort of doctrinal issue.
Right.
Now, 9 times out of 10, this particular person was saying it's a political issue.
Yeah.
I need to know where you stand on X before I will trust your Bible interpretation, right. And it's like, wow, so much for curiosity. My political views have changed over the years, and some of them align with how I've understood the Bible, and some of them have changed simply because I've seen how ugly some of the stuff is on the other side. And so what Michael's doing, which is interesting, he talked, in response to you, he talked about how the critique he was expecting is his book isn't institutional enough. And I think there's a place for the institutional. But what he's saying, I think, is really profound, that unless we're formed well in Jesus, being a Christian voter will just be another expression of personal preference, power, idolatry, as opposed to a legit working of service for the good of the world.
Yeah. What was the D. Willie quote that he used? Or no, C.S. Lewis. No, T.S. Eliot. Love T.S. Eliot.
They're all there.
But like that idea that, what was the quote?
That was
like,
juicy.
we want the system to be there so that we don't have to, don't have to
be
have
good.
the agency or care. Yeah. It's like, that is kind of it. And you see that with the lack of critical thinking. You see that with the lack of I think that really nails it right. Like just hits it right on the head.
Yeah.
And it's not just being told how to vote. It's also like, right. That's just the impetus. That's just the first piece. It's telling you who to vote for, what policies to vote for, but then you will carry the moral load for me. And then it's just, it's just backwards. And then you wonder, like, it's, again, Jesus not coming back as a political leader in that sense of like, coming in as
back as a partisan leader,
not coming back in that form or function, because you see how that works in our system. We're seeing that played out now. Luckily he had the foresight or whatever you want to call it to know what would be the most effective way to advocate for humanity and to advocate for what it means to live into that was not that version. It was this version. And we're kind of called to, and we're seeing ourselves called to that in this arena.
Yeah. I just think it's inescapable, and we have to spend more time on it, even though we're all nauseated with it.
I think 100%.
Yeah.
Like,
so
I'm trying to think about it in gears, like what we're called to and how we're supposed to live versus how the system operates. Those gears grind against each other. So we have, but they coexist. So we have to learn how to, does that make sense? Does that metaphor make sense?
Totally.
Like we have
Timothy, John. Yes.
But I think it's so important, maybe
gears.
more now than ever, to understand how to effectively or purposefully be in that system that that is built antithetical to
Totally.
the gospel.
Yeah.
Yet it is the civic construction of how we cohabitate.
Yeah.
So we have to know how to do this correctly.
Yeah. And as civic agreements go, democracy is a pretty good one. So I'm thrilled to live in this one.
Is it perfect?
As opposed to some of the other ones. No, it's not. And so we need to die to the hope that we'll return to some golden age of awesomeness. But I also think if you're like me, and I'm a Gen Xer, again, white-centered, privileged, all the things, I'm exhausted by it, and I'm full of hopelessness.
Yeah.
And I just sort of go, I don't know how to engage it without my big feelings taking over, to use therapeutic language. So this is going to be a live topic for us, Obvi. But hey, we love you guys. Hope this was helpful. Check out the book. It's a great book. The second part of the book is about how to engage in spiritual disciplines around the political process, which is a super interesting question. So he's channeling Dallas Willard, and because we love Dallas so much, we love channels of Dallas by the transitive property. So we love Michael. So anyway, until next time, friends.